Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Live Anywhere Uni podcast. Tonight, I'm with Catherine from Imperial College. This is a university that many of you already know, a very, very famous university in the heart of London. And we're very excited to engage into a conversation to discover this university a bit further tonight. Hi, Catherine. How are you doing?
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
It's nice to see you. I know we have lots of interest, and we see, every year more and more students interested into sciences, engineering, math, and it's kind of the heart of Imperial College. How would you describe your Imperial College? Like, is it, because it's not kind of your standard university where you can study everything. So how would you describe that institution?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we are definitely quite unique in the UK. We're the only UK university to solely focus on science, engineering, medicine, and then business together. So we offer lots of programs in those areas. So students, for example, wouldn't come do a general engineering. They get to go really specific into their subject. So we have lots in that area. But yes, they're not going to be able to come and do a history degree with us, for example. So our community is all about science and engineering, but also with that kind of entrepreneurship and business background as well.
Yeah, so because you have the business as well, that's kind of and you have even a business school. Because I tend to, sometimes students think, they put Imperial College in their list and they don't even realize that they don't offer some specific courses. And sometimes when I look at the London School of Economics, I would say that technically a student shouldn't be able to apply to both LSE and Imperial. But for some programs in math applied to finance, these kind of things, would you say that could be some common programs that you could have with LSE?
Yeah, no, that's a really great example. We're kind of, in a lot of ways, the other ends of the kind of subject spectrum, but there would be a couple of crossovers. So we do have, a range of mathematics programs. So, I'm sure there are some common grounds there with LSE. And we then have one undergraduate degree now in the business school. So it's only been running a couple of years now, but it is super popular. And that's economics, finance, and data science. So it is, again, quite unique. It's the only program in the UK to combine the three subjects together. But we're expecting students may well be, applying to economics or finance programs elsewhere. So we would say, again, there might be some common ground there.
Yeah, no, that's very, very cool to see that. Yeah, there is now an undergraduate program in that business school, because lots of students are keen. But yeah, we encourage them to look into the degree first and make sure that this is actually what they want to study. So you were mentioning earlier, because in the UK, we can see some universities that have a general engineering kind of first year where students can still explore, and then they will decide later on of their special interest in engineering. So at LSE, they have to be very specific from day one, and there is no way then to change. So the research has to happen prior to enrolling.
Yes, absolutely. So we really encourage students to do their research nice and early. So we have 10 different engineering departments, and they would be applying directly onto, a major in one of those departments. There, are some programs that are maybe kind of more on the broad spectrum. So areas like mechanical engineering, for example. You've got areas like sort of bioengineering, where you do a bit of mechanical, electronic. We have design engineering, again, mechanical, electronic engineering there, computing in there. So there's absolutely kind of the general side, but they're not going to be able to kind of switch between departments. Occasionally within a department, you might be able to change tracks. So for example, our computing, which is in the engineering faculty for us, has a number of different streams, and you might be able to change streams, but you're not going to be able to jump off from mechanical engineering into computing, for example. So yeah, doing the research nice and early on is really, really important.
Yeah, that's an advice we always we keep passing to the students, to tell them if you're looking at England and the UK, you have to do your research nice and early and get your focus, because with the British system, they have the A levels that kind of forces them to make that decision early, and some other system where they keep their spectrum of subjects a bit broad. They don't always have that mindset to get into that kind of research that early on.
Absolutely.
All right. And so how would you describe the rhythm, the kind of the student experience at Imperial College? It's very different from maybe a campus-based university. London is a city that many international students are very excited about, but it also has its challenges. What would you say? What did it look like to study at Imperial College?
I mean, I think we've got a really nice balance between the two, actually. So anyone who's been to South Kensington, that part of London, so we're next to the Natural History Museum, the Science Museum, Hyde Park, so that really, really central London location. However, when you walk through the doors in South Kensington, it's quite surprising to find that sort of campus bubble behind that. So as an undergraduate, you will spend the vast majority of your time there within basically a couple of blocks, really. So it's quite a small kind of area in a way that you can walk across campus and bump into the same people every day. You know, we have kind of student facilities there, our sports, gym there, for example, there's sort of social spaces. But then, yes, we are in the heart of London. You walk off campus and, as I said, you're next to the kind of museums. For example, all of our accommodation isn't right there in South Kensington, although some of it is. So that's where we're kind of that mix, because, yeah, we do have students who get used to kind of commuting across Hyde Park, for example, from halls of residence to come onto the teaching campus. But it's quite a close-knit community. We're sort of medium-sized for a UK university, sort of around 23,000 students. We're about half of those undergraduate. But it's quite a nice kind of close-knit community in terms of lots of activities going on in a fairly small space, even though then, I'd say all the added benefits of being a big city, the extra kind of, social aspects in the city, but also academic facilities, extra institutes, museums, galleries, specialist talks going on across the city, obviously the networking opportunities. So you've got all that hustle and bustle. But I'd say as well, it's kind of in a slightly quieter part of the city as well. So you don't feel sort of too overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good, I really like the campus. And so for the housing, is it, how does it work? Is it guaranteed for first-year international students, or do they have to really apply at a specific time? How does it work?
Yeah, so we absolutely prioritise housing for first-year students, and the vast majority of students take us up on that. So over 90% of first years stay in halls of residence, but they don't have to. So if have family or want to stay elsewhere, that's absolutely fine. So what we do is we basically do the guarantee for students who put us as their firm choice. Obviously in UCAS, they have the firm and insurance. So if they put us their firm choice, they get first priority, basically, as long as they get all their paperwork in time, that's all sorted. What we can't necessarily do is kind of guarantee which halls of residence they're in. So I mentioned we do have some halls that are right next to teaching. So unsurprisingly, they're probably the most popular, but we can't fit everyone there. So we have other spaces. The other halls of residence will have their own kind of pastoral care team, own social program, but maybe are that little bit further away. But yes, we absolutely prioritise for the first years. And then after that, we do have some halls that are for returning students, but not enough for everyone. So therefore, we support them in looking at sort of private accommodations. We have a dedicated accommodation team that will do that. And then finally, I'd say, again, a benefit of being in a big student city like London is if students do want more of that sort of dormitory environment and they can't stay in our halls from second year beyond, there are kind of private providers in the city. So they could be, on a corridor sharing with other London University students. So there are a few different options.
All right. And it's good for sometimes students and families have a hard time understanding that there is an umbrella university. Is Imperial College still part of the University of London?
No, so we were originally. So yes, on our centenary in 2007, we left. So we were for 100 years, but we're a bit further kind of out, and we decided to go our own way.
All right. Yeah. So that most of the main well-known London universities are either come from or are still affiliated with the University of London. And so Imperial is fully independent now. Okay. So in terms of number of hours, what does it typically look like at Imperial College? The workload for students, what's the balance between independent work, contact hours, and what kind of is the class size that students can expect?
So, probably you hear this from a lot of UK universities, but it does depend a bit on the program that you're studying. Generally you find the sort of STEM programs have more contact hours than, say, the humanities. And with us, it would kind of vary a bit between, say, more the sciences and your engineering type programs. And again, it might differ a little bit depending on sort of which year of study you're in. But most, engineering programs, for example, have a fairly full course timetable. So students are in most most days during the week. It might not be totally 9 to 5, but with a mixture of kind of lectures, labs, tutorials, working on projects, for example. They're likely to spend a good bit of time on campus during the week. Wednesdays are always left free of teaching, the same as every British university, so that students can engage in societies, sports, things like that. So Wednesday afternoons will be free. But yeah, a lot of students will be on campus kind of, most of the day with a bit of break in between. There is definitely a kind of element of independent learning though. So even though, perhaps the timetable looks more full than, say, a humanities program, there is still that element of sort of independent learning, because we do really put an emphasis on kind of flipped learning, whereby students come to campus to engage. So when they are in those kind of tutorial groups, in those labs, they've come prepared so that they can really engage with the material. We've actually, over the last kind of 5 or 6 years, sort of moved away from those kind of large lectures. I think actually a positive thing that came out of the pandemic, whilst there still may be some large lectures as a kind of core base knowledge for some of the areas, we actually do a lot of kind of that being recorded now, so students can watch that back in their own time, with the idea that when they're on campus in those kind of more smaller group teachings, they can really engage with the material and have those conversations with the academics. And that's one of the really nice things I get from our students, is the kind of relationship they build with the academics. At the end of the day, if they're really passionate about the subject that's being taught to them, then the academic is often really happy to kind of stay after class and chat a bit more about it. So there's a real kind of, it's a slightly different shift, I guess, from the sort of school teacher pupil dynamic. It's a bit more peer-to-peer in that respect. But yeah, the hours will definitely kind of vary, but there's definitely an emphasis of kind of really engaging with the material rather than sitting there quite passively.
All right. And so in a school like that, where the tech and I guess the science is at the heart of everything. How do students get experiences? Like, do you offer co-op programs, or do they have a way to do sandwich years internships, or is it even on campus that they have like real competitions or things like that, where they will kind of not only have the theory base, but also kind of get these first experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different things going on. It always astounds me how busy our students are with all the different options. I mean, first of all, we've got the kind of standard approach with, say, a year abroad program or a year in industry that will be clearly advertised on kind of the study pages. It's not something that is on offer for all departments, but students can clearly see if they want to take that full year approach. Other programs will have, say, a term written into the curriculum where they'll do a kind of placement, for example. So something like design engineering, there's kind of hands-on experience computing offer that, for example. Otherwise, we have a dedicated part of our career service that kind of concentrate on internships. So a lot of our students will do an internship, say, during the summer break. You get 3 months off, so a great opportunity to spend time doing that. For students who are on an international visa, you can work full time during the holidays. You can work 20 hours per week during term as well. Although we do advise not to plan to work that much because of how much
you're allowed to with your student visa.
Yes, so you're allowed to work 20 hours per week during the term, although we do advise to kind of not plan to work that regularly due to kind of commitments of study. But it might be an opportunity, say, you can do a few hours a week, kind of committing somewhere and again, getting that experience. Research is something that's really big for us on campus as well. So actually a lot of our departments offer a 4-year undergraduate degree program, but that's because you actually qualify with a master's level at the end of it. And with that, it means that you will have done some independent research as well during that. Otherwise, we also have things like the undergraduate research opportunities program. So that's something whereby you can get involved in research that's going on across the university. Kind of, often our students, they will just, again, talk to the academics who are teaching them and find out about what they're doing. And quite often they can get involved in that. We have the international version of that, the IROP scheme. So students could go and do a placement with partners like MIT, for example. So yeah, lots of different ways to get involved.
Oh, that's perfect. And so it is something I want to go back to, because it's very different depending on the country, the countries. Is the fact that you can do a Bachelor of Engineering, a BEng, and an MEng. So how long are these, and do you need like an MEng to qualify is there such a thing as qualifying as a certified engineer in the UK, because in some countries, you have to go through a specific path to get that certification. Because sometimes families and students are a bit confused. Like, should I choose the B-Eng, the M-Eng? If I do the B-Eng, can I do the M-Eng after? If I do the M-Eng, can I just stop after 3 years? How does it work?
Great question. So an undergraduate sort of bachelor's degree would be 3 years. So the B-Eng would be the option for that. And you'll see that then that's available, kind of in a number of departments. Actually, the majority of our departments focus on the M-Eng, the Master of Engineering. So basically, the first 2 years of those programs are exactly the same. And actually, if a student were enrolled on the M-Eng for a start and then decide, actually, I've just finished, I want to be done in 3 years, normally they can make that final decision to wrap up kind of in 3 years. It's the same curriculum. The 4-year option contains that research element I talked about. So that's where they, will get the master's qualification from doing that independent research. The kind of two different routes to kind of get in the master's. So you could do a 3-year B-Eng and then do a standalone MSc program. However, if you are looking to go down that chartered engineering route, it's generally recommended to do the 4-year M-Eng because it's the continuous engineering qualification. Both finish with a master's. It could be that you do a B-Eng and then actually you feel like you want to change direction perhaps and do a different kind of MSc focus. But for most students kind of thinking long term around the engineering, that the M-Eng sets them up better for that.
All right, very, very clear. Thank you very much. Even sometimes I wonder about that, so it's good for me to hear that again. Okay, so Imperial, must attract a lot of international students because it's a name that's well known. What's your undergraduate student population like in terms of the nationalities and where students come from?
So we're really diverse, really cosmopolitan. So over half of our students, around 54% of our undergraduates are from outside the UK, from well over 100 different countries. So yes, really, really diverse population. Lots of students, from Asia, Europe, the Americas. So yeah, a really nice mix. We think that, really adds to the experience in campus because you're getting ideas and perspectives from around the globe, from your peers, from your classmates. Our academics, our teaching staff are very diverse and cosmopolitan as well. And I guess we again reflect London in that sense as well. So yes, a really international community.
Right, so that brings me to that question of do you have a cap? Does it change something, the fact that you are considered either a resident when you apply or an international student? Does it change anything? Is there more or less places in each program depending on your status, your fee status, I guess, when you apply?
Yeah, so generally, no. The only exception to that is medicine. So medicine, and generally in the UK, any programs related to the National Health Service, for Imperial, it'd just be medicine, do have a cap on the number of non-UK students. Actually, ours has increased this year. So we have 70 places for non-UK students to do medicine. All the other subjects, we're just looking for the best and the brightest students, no matter where they're from. So we have no kind of caps. We have a rough idea of being 50-50 in departments, but it's not a hard kind of set rule for us. We genuinely are looking for the best students, no matter where they're from.
Well, this gives me a perfect transition for my next topic on the admission and application side. So I know in Imperial you might have some different ways of selecting students depending on the program, but overall, what would you say? How would you say you select students? What do you look at? What's important for you to what are you looking for in students applying to Imperial?
I mean, the first thing really is those academic qualifications, and similar to, the majority of the UK, it's actually what are you finishing school with? So yes, we will look back through your academic record, but for us, we take into account, anything you're still sitting in your kind of senior year of high school. So we'll be looking at predicted grades from school and we'll take those at face value. And for us, it's quite black and white in terms of if you don't meet the minimum we are looking for. And we do kind of have specific requirements around things like subjects being, very STEM focused. Things like maths and sciences are very important for us. If you're not on track to get those minimum entry requirements, then that really is the end of the line for us. So we do kind of, recommend you really do kind of your research on that. If you have those minimum entry requirements, then kind of lots of other things come into play at that point. So, Beyond the minimum entry requirements, great, but other aspects will certainly be counted. So the personal statement is something that's really important for us. We do really want to know your motivation to do that particular subject. Again, thinking that you're coming straight on to that, bioengineering degree, for example. What's your motivation to do that? How have you engaged with the subject? How do you know this is a good fit for you? And basically, why are you a really strong candidate to be considered for that particular program? The reference, the UCAS reference, kind of backs this up and does come into play. And then generally, because as you touched on, we do get a lot of students applying to us, we have introduced now some admissions tests for a number of programs, just to give us that added layer of kind of separating between, excellent students at the end of the day. It's not for all departments, but sort of broadly speaking, we have something called the ESAT, the Engineering and Science Admissions Test. So it's a joint test that you can also take if you're applying to Cambridge for a number of programs, and that's for a number of our engineering programs, including and also then physics, and then something called the TAMUA, the maths test that's been around for a few years, but it's the first time we're taking that, and that's for computing, mathematics, the economics, finance, and data science program mentioned, as well as then the UCAT for medicine. So, as I said, not all departments, but that is an element to it. So it's really overall, it's that kind of strong academic performance, that sort of subject fit, and that strength in the relevant subjects, and that kind of motivation to study that very specific program at a degree level.
And do you systematically, because sometimes you have interviews, is it for every program, or do you have some programs where there's no interview, or is it for everyone?
So that is, again, a mixed approach from our departments. So I'd say over half of them tend to interview now. So the only programs that don't either have the test or interview or both would really be our life sciences department. So if you're applying to life sciences, it's purely on that personal statement and your academic profile. The other departments will have a mixture between the admissions test approach or the interview or both. Generally, interviews only happen for those students we think, have a good chance of being offered a place. So if you're given an interview, it's a really positive sign. So it's kind of, we think you look really good on paper, and it's about kind of engaging with you further around that.
And so the tests, are they all, when they are there, are they always prior to a potential interview invitation, or are you sometimes invited to a test and an interview kind of together?
Generally, the interviews will normally take place after the test. So the tests happen in 2 dates in the year. So there's an October round and then a January sitting of the tests. We only take kind of your first one, so you can't sort of sit in October and then retake it in January. But yes, we'll get these kind of tests done and then the interviews. So interviews are starting from around November time each year and rolling into kind of February time.
Would you encourage students to try to meet that first deadline, or does it really not change anything in the process?
It doesn't really change anything. You have kind of equal chance. Think about you when, your time pressures, sometimes doing it later. Maybe you've got kind of more time, or you've had time to engage with it more, but maybe you're someone who'd just like to get it over and done with, and then you can obviously concentrate on the rest of your schooling. But we take both absolutely equally. Obviously, if you're applying to Cambridge as well, then they would need the October sitting.
Yeah. And I'm sure same thing, the answer is always nuanced between departments and subjects, but what does an Imperial interview kind of looks like?
Yeah, really good question. So, we will start off with a bit of, kind of motivation again, sort of drilling down, why this particular subject, why this subject with us, for example. We'll often refer back to something you said in your personal statement. So that's definitely a really good tip to make sure you have a copy of that, because that can actually be what we see as a nice warm-up question. But if you're thrown by something you'd written last year and you can't remember about it, so kind of, if you mention a particular area of the subject, we will talk about that. But then our interviews do normally have a sort of technical element to them. So something like a maths problem, a technical engineering problem, for example. So they are challenging. It's not just a kind of talk and, sort of nicer side of things. Not that we're looking to be horrible to you at all, but it's looking to challenge you. So we're not necessarily expecting students to kind of answer straight away. It's not about sort of being able to pick that answer out, immediately. We want to kind of see how you approach a problem, how you use, for example, your maths knowledge to tackle a problem, and actually having a conversation around the problem. So even, for example, if you don't really know, but you ask questions about it and you kind of work towards an answer, we'd rather students kind of sit there and talk through their thinking rather than just kind of being blank. So it's not that, we're looking to kind of test them out or expect them to get things right straight away. It's really looking at their approach and how they're able to use the knowledge they do have to maybe tackle a new challenge.
All right. So very similar to the Cambridge and Oxford style of interviews.
So yeah, quite similar in terms of that academic kind of focus.
All right. Are they still all online? Is that going to ever change, or you think that's for the foreseeable future? It's going to be.
I think again, something hopefully we've learned from the pandemic that generally the online tests, online interviews work fine. Medicine is the one that generally would prefer you to come, to London. Obviously, there's a lot of kind of different skills going on with that. We do tend to invite students to a kind of interview day. So, as part of that would be the interview on campus, but then they can see the department, talk to students as well. So we do say, if it's possible, do take us up on that offer. It's not that it's going to give you an advantage, but it's a chance for you to kind of see, are you happy here? Are you going to fit into the department? But we realise, as we said, we have students from all around the world. So if it's just not possible to come over, we will do our best to ensure that you can have an online interview. All
right, great. And so going back a bit on the personal statement, what would you mentioned, you talked about it a little bit. So how can students, because it's always difficult for students to be like, oh, you talked about some programs that were quite unique to Imperial. So how can a student navigate thinking, okay, I have Imperial in my list. Let's say that's my top choice. We know they're very selective, and you have that very unique program. How do you approach that? Like, should students write thinking about only your program? Do they have to? How do you? Yeah.
No, definitely. I mean, we are aware where our programs are quite unique. So we know the reality is, of course, students will be applying elsewhere. We really recommend that you concentrate on the kind of common threads. So, for example, with the economics, finance and data science program, if you're applying to economics elsewhere, then, lots in there about the economics, but maybe thinking about, for example, how data science might be useful in that field. So there's a kind of hint that you are interested in that, but it's not to the extent that it would really kind of raise a red flag with anyone else. We're not looking for you to kind of, annoy other universities by any means. So it's really about concentrating on those common threads, common skill sets, that sort of, crossover between the subjects. It is a really kind of academically subject focused statement. We're not so interested, in sort of general extracurriculars and things unless they relate to the program. So, things like showing evidence of your interest in the subject, what sort of experiences you've done around it. That can be a whole range of things. Maybe you're lucky enough to get some sort of work experience, fantastic, but it could also be things like, reading a scientific journal, listening to podcasts, watching relevant YouTube channels, documentaries. It's not looking for a set list of things. It's about how a student reflects on them and how you kind of analyze your interest and kind of want to go deeper. So overall, the statement is really about that kind of depth rather than breadth of activities.
So would your advice be don't use ChatGPT?
I mean, fine for, check-in things and things like that, but ChatGPT will only be able to give a very surface level of, if you put in what's a great mechanical engineering personal statement, it's not going to be personal to you. It's not going to be about your experiences. So we do want to hear your genuine kind of experiences, your thoughts about these activities. Did you do something that actually changed your mind about your approach to a certain subject? Or did it, really kind of confirm your interest in an area? So, fine for checking things, but yes, we can see when it's a very sort of, surface level. It's also, at the end of the day, if you're going to be studying this subject for, 3 or 4 years and you're not able to write a statement that's, 4,000 characters around it, then, maybe that's a sign that, you should be thinking, a bit more about it.
Well, thank you for this, because this is exactly my line. And it's good for everyone to hear that again. So when going a bit more specifically, because we help a lot of students preparing for the French bac, so they have different math options, especially in your final year. In terminal, you have the math complémentaire, the math specialty, and then you have an extra expert math that you can add to your math specialty. Would you say that as long as you have the math specialty when math is required, it's fine? Or would you encourage students to take on these extra hours of expert math when they're looking at Imperial College?
Yeah, so we do have it specifically outlined by different degree programs. So really pleased, a few years ago, we had an update. So you can go by your individual program. If you go under, it'll be under France, but the French bac requirements will be there. So currently some of our departments, some of the engineering, for example, mathematics, do actually require the maths expert. However, we have had some feedback that obviously that is a difficult option for some schools and not always able to offer it. So that is actually under review at the moment. So it may change in future years. So any, students looking at kind of 2026 and beyond, please do double check back. But currently for 2025 entry, there's a mix. So some departments, standard maths, absolutely fine, but others are currently requiring the maths expert.
That's good. Thank you very much. And so in the French bac, we also have this international French bac, the BFI or BFE, that adds a lot of hours of English. Is that something you consider? Do you make a difference? We know that some universities will sometimes give an entry, a conditional offer a bit lower with the BFI, or that would be that could replace an English language test. Does it play any role at Imperial College?
We can meet our English language requirements. So normally a 12 will satisfy to meet our English language. So that's something we'll take into consideration. At the moment, our overall grading in terms of what we're looking for in the final grade and the subjects, it is the same. But again, as part of that review that we're doing, we are going to weigh up whether it will be at a slightly lower, considering, as you say, the extra hours involved. So at the moment, still the same, but it is under review.
All right, great. Thank you very much. How sometimes students are wondering how, because in that system they're always surprised that they can't send their transcript with all their coursework, and they have to declare only kind of official exams. So they can declare the brevet, which is what it's not quite equivalent to the GCSEs taken a year earlier in the French system. They can declare the subjects they take officially for the French bac at the end of year 12, grade 11, so the French literature. Would you say that these grades are important to kind of give credibility to the predictions, or do you focus on the predictions and look at these previous achieved exams kind of in a separate way, or is it kind of looked at all together?
Predicted ones are the most important to us. So, that is the kind of focus. That's the indication to us. Are you on track to be able to, do well on our program is through that predicted grade. But we do, look back and take into consideration. So, kind of obviously a strong score lower down is always going to be a good thing. But, we might be happy to see improvements through there. And we won't count it against someone if they are improving and that actually their predicted grades are kind of stronger than lower down. We will take those at face value. We know predicted grades are predictions. It's not a set science, but we do kind of set them at face value, and conditional offers will be set kind of around that. Strong scores are always going to be a positive thing, but it's just one of those things that comes into the mix with the personal statement, with admissions tests, interviews. As I said, the predicted grades, it's kind of, that's the main black and white thing. Do you have the minimum? If you do, then, the other qualifications you have will be part of the overall picture.
All right. Thank you very much. So in terms of the English language requirements, do you have a set standard for the entire university, or does it depend on programs?
You have some, so we call it standard and higher, depending on the program. So students can see if there is a difference between those two. But I believe for the BFI, it's the same for both.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. I think we've covered a lot of grounds already. How difficult is it, especially for medicine, to enter Imperial College? Is that 70 places, you said, I think, for international students. What's the competition like? Is it just to give an idea, maybe for students to realize how difficult or how maybe they should still try, and where are we at? Because it's
Yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of how competitive, our programs do really vary because we're not looking for that one undergraduate cohort. We're assessing everyone against the cohort applying to that department. So actually, for example, the Economics, Finance and Data Science program became our most oversubscribed. We had 35 applications per place for that program.
35 per place.
The program is due to grow in future years. So hopefully we can cater for those applicants a bit more. But yes, that one is super competitive. But then something like we have subjects like material science, for example, is not so well known. So that might be, something like 4 or 5 applications per place. Medicine overall is a competitive subject anyway. So we do, kind of have on average, believe it's around sort of 10 applications per place, but that's the overall one. Then out of that, we have the international number. I don't have the exact kind of ratios at the moment. So up until this year, we actually only had 24 places available per year. So we're actually really excited that it's gone up to 70.
That's a big jump, 24 to 70.
Big jump. And that's actually quite a big jump compared to a lot of UK universities, because we actually have a new medicine campus that's in the UK for UK students, but that's allowed us to then offer more spaces in London for our international students. So 70 is actually one of the kind of larger ones. So if you're a strong medic, go for it. It is competitive, but it is of course possible.
And what would be your advice for a student thinking about medicine? What should they engage in the few years prior to applying?
Yeah, so work experience is something, we don't say it's a requirement for all our programs, but it is very recommended for medicine. It doesn't have to be, something really fancy, getting into a hospital, things like that necessarily. It can be more in a kind of care provision. If you can go and volunteer in a care home, for example, volunteer to work with children. It's about kind of thinking about the whole package of being a doctor, basically. So yes, you need to be good at science, but we can get that from your kind of academic profile. So it's all those other subjects we're looking for. We're not just looking for people to be able to, just kind of do really well in exams and just be sort of strong in the theory side. You're going to have to talk to patients, communication skills, leadership skills, for example. So having some, experiences that can demonstrate those kind of skills are really positive. We also want to know you have a realistic expectation of what it means to be a doctor. It's not just what you might see on like Grey's Anatomy and sort of, TV shows. The reality can be, very tough. So, again, having that sort of understanding and experience. Obviously, the fact if you're applying to us, you're applying to a very specific health system. So the NHS, the National Health Service. So you don't have to go into detail around that, but, do reflect on the fact that is different and what that might mean. And by the time, if you come to interview, we will be expecting you to kind of be aware of the National Health Service. What are the pressures? What are the difficulties? How, might that affect things? So really doing your research and getting some kind of hands-on experience around, sort of care provision and the medical world is really, really useful.
Do you have to be 18 on the first day of the course at Imperial?
Yes, for us, you do, because there is an element of kind of patient contact in the first year.
All right. What about, I always have students, I'm sure you also have lots of students always asking about scholarships for international students. And I tend to tell them at the undergraduate level for international students, there are very few. Are there still opportunities for students to try to get some scholarship at Imperial College?
Sadly, undergraduates, there isn't a lot out there scholarships-wise. We do have a scholarship for students applying to us with the International Baccalaureate. So there's around 25 of those available if you're, doing very well. So it is a merit-based scholarship. There may be odd scholarships within, set departments. So do double check to see if there is anything for the program you're applying to. But generally, not so much at undergraduate level, unfortunately.
And if whether you're EU or not doesn't change anything?
No, so it's the same.
All right. Great. Any advice you would have for students dreaming about, 14, 15, 16-year-old students dreaming about Imperial College? What would be your final advice on looking at this journey? There's lots of other great options, and they're going to apply to more than one university. But what would be your advice?
I mean, do that research nice and early. So yes, so that kind of age is great to start those kind of thoughts around it. We have lots of information online, but kind of, information sessions, about Imperial as a whole, but also then those departments. So again, it's at this point, you might have an idea about engineering, but you'll want to be drilling down into those different areas. So, finding out what the different programs look like, having a look at the course content, talking to some of our current students. So we have an option through our website that you can reach out to current students, find out what their experiences are like, what are the differences between the different programs. If you have the opportunity to come and visit, please do. We do campus tours every week, so you can come and visit us. We have our open days in the summer where you can go and talk to all the departments, all these different talks going on. But generally, you can always come and visit. You can always reach out to my team, and we're happy to kind of show you around. We do also have a summer school for 16 and 17-year-olds, so you can come and do a 2-week experience with us in like engineering or physical sciences, medical sciences. So again, sort of hands-on, experience of what it'd be like to study with us. So yeah, do the research nice and early on. I'd say as well as you start that journey, hopefully looking to apply, start making notes about those experiences. When you're in class, if you do something that's really interested, that's related to the subject you want to do, make a note about it. As I said, kind of by the time you come to apply to us, the personal statement, it will take a little bit of time, but it should be relatively easy because you've hopefully got lots of really great experiences, lots of interest to talk about. So, never too early to start kind of making those notes and brainstorming and just keeping a record of what you're doing as you engage and find out more.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for all the nice tips you just gave in the last 60 seconds and for the invitation to come visit the campus. I think that's so important for students to before they kind of commit to try to go visit. And I mean, being in London is not too difficult to visit if you can get there. All right, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And to everyone, we will see you in another episode of the Anywhere Uni podcast soon. Thank you.